Thank you all for being here. So we were realizing that we've known each other for a decade, maybe 11 years even. I first got to meet Roksana when I was a visiting professor at Cal Arts in 2015. And she was a very talented undergrad. Everybody was like, "You're an undergrad? Wow, okay." Then we just kept in touch. You helped me for some summers in my studio. Eventually you came to UCLA, where actually the same year I got the Wanless Artist in Residence was also when I got my UCLA full-time job, and it was a very busy year. But it was a wonderful opportunity to be here at Occidental, and it's so wonderful to see Roksana, come through the UCLA graduate program and then do this amazing show. I mean, she's always been an amazing artist, so I can't say become an amazing artist. She's been an amazing artist since I met her as an undergrad. And get to also see her become a teacher and hear her talk about her star students at Occidental and how wonderful the Wanless program has been for her as well. So proud of you. And this is an amazing show. For those of you that haven't seen the counterpart of the show at Joan, it's incredibly strong. They're actually linked in a secret way that is really amazing. And so I recommend going over there to see it if you haven't. I think it's up longer, right?
3 weeks till May 3rd.
May 3rd. So one thing that I was thinking about when I saw this exhibition and the show at Joan, which are, I guess, two parts of the same show, is that you do something where the sounds of people activating the sculpture here are reverberating as a kind of effect of the sculptures vibrating in the show at Joan. And having known your work since you were an undergrad, I've seen you do this in a number of different ways. So I thought I would make Roksana share with you some of her amazing older work. So we put together some slides. This is a work that you made at Cal Arts. Talk. So a lot of things that I've seen Roksana do over the years, there's often a sense of one thing happening in one space and an effect happening in another space. And I asked her once, why that was, and I'm asking her again to respond to this question of why. But one of my theories was that it has to do with being a kind of diasporic subject in the world. So this work... Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Candice. So this work was called Swing, and I did it, I think, first year at Cal Arts. And the video that is on the screen is a live video from home in Yaz. That is from the rooftop. My brother just put the laptop there. It was on Skype. Back then, Skype was the Zoom, and then and basically I was thinking about that 2014. So I moved to America 2012, and being away was really. It was way more felt than now. I feel like now I'm more a part of LA and a part of community, but back then I felt so longing this. Other part of me, and I felt most of my work actually back then was about this longing and wanting to be back and missing home. And then being also here, I'm from a hometown, my town is called Yazd, and Yazd is known for its adobe building, and everything is kind of this clay color. And I did not notice that till I kind of came out, and I was like, oh, everything is so monotone. And this was an attempt to kind of add color to that monotone city in a way, or adding I remember that was the thing I was thinking when I was doing it. But yeah, so I was like swinging and there was color and I was trying to...
Were you kicking the powdered
I was,
pigment?
and
so
then
there was
trying
like
to make a print from
an
our
early
feet.
version of the body kind of making a mark, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you kind of continued this idea of doing an action, usually a subtle performative action in one space that then has an effect on another space in the thesis work you made for MFA, which you exhibited at Murmurs Gallery.
Yeah. And this, I think like wall has always like one thing happen on one side of the wall and the effect is on the other side without us knowing. And this was kind of a continuation of that basically I created this wall and there was like this ceramic tablet with cast of my grandmother's finger covering an image of my great-grandparents. And I mean, we can talk about this later, but about like this, this was the first time that actually I was like using like family imagery. And then on the other side, I'm rocking on this armchair that, belongs to my, like, I mean, from our home. I just brought it there. And as I'm pulling this, all these fingers are attached to this thread. So as I'm pulling them and rocking, those fingers lift and tap the image. And everything is ceramic. So over time, it's going to wear away and change. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about, so maybe I won't play this one in the interest of time, but so how you've done these works in many different iterations, some of them very explicitly dealing with a kind of longing for home, some of them more just talking about the cause that's unseen as an effect in another space. You also, as many of you know who make big installations and performance, there's not always the funding for being able to make them. So Roksana has these amazing drawings she makes of her ideas that she started to translate into these clay tablet drawings. And so some of these are proposals that have yet to happen, right?
Yeah.
Of sculptural things that are happening in one space where maybe a crank is getting pulled in another space and different things are happening. And can you talk a little bit about how there's a difference between all these different iterations of thinking about two different spaces with cause and effect?
Yeah, and I think like these very much, like especially the one with the hair and this installation that I did, I mean, all of this kind of started during pandemic, and then we were kind of literally in rooms and we were communicating through the rooms kind of. And so I was thinking about like how an action in one room can affect through this, literally like cutting a hole through the clay and like connecting them through the hairs of the bodies in the spaces, and it's either pulling or like saving someone, or like these actions that could be both causing like harm or can be an action of love, or I don't know. It was like, and then they became more surreal and like.
And they led to these works,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So these are like kind of a continuation of that, and then bodies became kind of like a room. And yeah, it was like I was seeing the bodies like a beat, kind of like beating each other with the room, and yeah, it's like a more simple way of like with the installation. It's like, I don't know, the tablet's very like, quicker way of like creating an image, an idea, rather than like, creating an installation takes so much energy and material. And like this could also be way more surreal or dreamy.
I love though that these things that started with this very like pragmatic purpose then evolved into these really emotionally charged landscapes of rooms, and now bodies as landscapes, right? Yeah. These like later works. Oh, I didn't realize you had another one here. People can see it a little better.
There's one close-up, I think.
And are the figures you?
Yeah, when I'm drawing, I imagine myself, but I can see it could, it could
Can you
be
talk a
better.
little bit about, so recent, if they are you, like recently there's been these baby figures that
Yeah.
have popped up.
They're
You
also
have something
me.
to tell me?
Yeah, I think they are like versions of a self. Like I see the baby and like more like smaller adult, and also that landscape body, all to be the same figure, kind of intertwined, and different layers of the self, like more in the head than the outside. But it also, I can see it can refer to a bigger, like to many bodies, like kind of interacting. So you can have a literal. Not literal,
Like
it cannot
you
happen,
interacting
but
with the
yeah.
collective self or something?
Yeah.
Oh, here's another one. What is this one? Oh, this is kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, this was also like the first year at CalArts when I was, like language also was I don't know, I have a hard time with the language.
Actually, yeah, this goes with my other question. You're like looking at me like, ask your other question. Yeah, I noticed that like part of this idea of like the things happening in one room with an effect in the other room also has a relationship to the act of translation, right? So you've done this work, which you can talk about, and then also works where speech is like literally being muffled either by like a weird ceramic thing around your tongue or like your mouth submerged in the water. And yeah, I was just curious to hear in your own words like how you talk about these kind of mufflings of language or the act of translation.
Yeah, I think like
Talk about that one.
Yeah, with this one, it was title. Let me explain it. And it was basically it was my first work that I did at CalArts as a part of like a sculpture class that I took, and the prompt was gravity, and so I like suspended this box. I was inside this box, and with a thread and needle, I was communicating with the audience outside. So I was thinking about alternative ways of communicating, like not just the language, but what if like a thread and needle is the only tool we have to communicate? So as I would poke the needle out, the audience would take it, put it back in, and through this communication, it could have been like me poking them or they poking me, kind of. And at the end, I got born from this thing, which is
and there's often like there's often like an edge of not violence is maybe too dramatic, but like in the moving room I didn't talk about, people are shoving this room that they don't realize you're inside of until they might like feel the resistance of your body or hear you like. And this one they might not realize you're inside until they see the needle come back out at them, right? What is that for you?
I think I'm thinking that like violence sometimes can't, like it's not violence. It's like it can be like without you knowing causing something, like without your conscious or like even in like intention, you can like, and the situations that I create, it kind of creates the situation for that of by pushing this thing or pulling this thing, you don't know what's happening, like what that simple action is doing. And that can extend to many other things too. And so it's, I think that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
Is it, oh, this one's spelled wrong.
yes.
Sink in reading or sink in reading?
Sank the password?
Sink, yeah.
Yeah, sank in reading. Sank in reading for the, this one was the, forgot
I
the
feel
name
like
of
this
the
one
book.
has your angst of grad school, being
Yeah.
forced to read things like Kant and Hegel. And,
Or actually, it was kind of my frustration with CalArts, maybe. Or like all the, or also language, like my relationship with like philosophical readings and not understanding them. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm like a very practical person, and I'm like, I don't know how this can relate to. Maybe if I read it now, I would understand it. Back then, I was not ready. I don't know.
I don't know if it's that easy at any point to understand it.
Yeah.
So you're reading Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason,
exactly,
underwater, and the book is kind of disintegrating.
so it's like basically trying a, like, I don't know. It's like
I love this body language too.
It's a futile action of trying to read, but I can't read. And that's how I felt actually reading that book. Yeah.
And it reminded me a little bit of this work you made early on when you were still in Iran, where, can you talk a little bit about this group of female friends that you guys went around and did performances with, and the history of that?
Yeah.
And what you're doing here?
That period of like that, when I was in high school, like we made this group, and we were kind of meeting every single day, like weekends, weekdays. Our parents were like, "What are you guys doing?" But it was the most fun, exciting time, and shaping my practice also. And this was This was one of the only ones actually we got a permission to do a public thing, and we got permission to do it in this art university. We didn't really explain what we are about to do, and they were like, okay, these are high school kids, they won't do much harm. And then the plan was we would do it for a week, and after the first night, there were like no second night. And then, so each of us took a part. It was like in an old house in Yazd. And each of us took a part, like we were like, okay, I have an idea for this pond. Like my friend had an idea for another room. And so we would kind of lead the audience through the building as one performance ends, and we go to the other. I did this painting in the pond, and trying this, again, like this futile action of like trying to paint under the water. And I knew my teacher is in the audience. I even didn't, like, it kind of like, it was like one of the first performances that I was like in front of a bigger audience. And I did not like think about, okay, how do I end this performance? And then, so when I was doing it, I was like, okay, I need to end this at some point. And then I realized, okay, my teacher is in the crowd, and I called him out. And I was like, what do you think of my painting?
And he was like, it's the best. You're the best student I've ever had.
Yeah. No, he was silent. He was like, probably. I was like, don't drag me into this. And then my friend kind of got the message that she has to pull me to. So then I was a part of her performance, and then she became a part of the next performance. So it was like this chain of actions that we were doing.
Yeah, I remember you showed me that work at CalArts in frustration. You were like, I want to get back to this, like, you didn't use these words, but like feral self that I was. And like, I feel that you found your way back to it. I don't know what was happening at the time, but then you made this work for at CalArts. If you, maybe more briefly we can talk.
Yeah. So this one was, again, continuation of like me suffering from trying to expressing myself or with the language. And so I created this devices that I was thinking, what if like we take the meaning out of words and it's just mumbles? And so I created this devices that does that. And this actually, I took my first ceramic class with Candice my last year, and that's how I got into ceramic. And this was like the first ceramic.
I was pretty new to ceramics too.
Well, I learned a lot. And I was like, okay, ceramic is so amazing. You can put it in your mouth, take it out, clean it, and reuse it. So
that's a funny relationship with ceramics. I mean, speaking of putting things in your mouth, it's funny because this work I remember got a lot of erotic reads, and then like your work at Joan, the vibrating chairs, also feel like there's a bit of erotics, but you almost never talk about that as part of your work? This is not on the question list.
But I think it's a second read to it. I never it's not intentional. It just I think thinking about body, it just like somehow it comes through. Yeah. And then so this was basically different scenarios in the room, and it's like you could either talk to the wall.
Oh, and you made the sink that hooked to the real bathroom.
Exactly. So there was a sink there. You could wash so the devices would come off, and then you wash it and put it back. So I created the situation that the group of people can talk around the table, or they could talk to me, or they could talk to the wall. And all these sounds also would get amplified to the outside of the gallery. Like they all had like little microphone attached to them.
And the live feed was like looping on itself, right? So there was a kind of chorus that happened of these distorted voices, by my memory.
No, it was live.
Oh, it was live, okay.
It was live.
I thought it was looping.
Yeah, and this was on the CalArts campus, a pair of ground. The idea was to dug these 2 holes that are longer than an average leg size. So when you're sitting in the ground, you're held up by your crutch and you're not touching the ground. So literally.
Not erotic.
So literally being in the ground but not feeling grounded. That was the reason. I did not. Being held up by the crutch was the next thing.
Of course. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the way that you think about performance. It's not theatrical per se. There's often these like subtle shifts in the way we perceive the world. That you make us feel through the change in space or the change to our ability to speak, right?
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about some performance or artistic kind of influences on you. This one was one that I thought of in relationship to your work back at CalArts. We talked about this work and you were like, I love that work.
Yeah.
And then also the performance of objects, right? So sometimes it's about like this work by, I think I spelled his name wrong, Pirouzmand, where there's just a whole and answer going into it. And you also think about these kind of subtle interventions with your work that kind of perform and maybe change over time. And yeah, so can you talk a little bit about that? This is just in here because I was gonna razz her a little bit about how she doesn't like to talk about her work, and that's why she made all those installations about not wanting to talk clearly. But then she does often talk about how she loves the way that Kiarostami talks in interviews about why it's difficult to like explain the work and why it's at odds with the power and emotional kind of strength of the work having its own poetics.
I like the one thing about the Kiarostami that it gives me a good excuse. Like that's how I understand the language. Is like similar. I think how he talks about music in the movie. He says that music has too much emotions. Like it can manipulate or it can really hold the power in movies that he prefers just like not to not to hold that much power with the music. And I think language can do a similar thing in a way that I feel like language is so powerful that it can overpower or take a harder role like in the visual language. And that's why I'm never like really, actually this is one of the titles I'm happy about. Usually I'm not happy with my titles because I'm like, I don't know if that title is doing it's adding much to the work. And I feel like sometimes it does become.
And a lot of your titles come more from poetry?
Yeah, I'll try, I think I relate to language next to the visual language in a poetic way than in a didactic. Even explaining my work, when I even try to write, I never can really explain it. I usually, when I'm even explaining, I turn out to be like small sentences that it would read at the end, like a poem. because it's not really clear for me also, like what the work is about.
Yeah, no, I remember when we were working on your thesis statement.
It turned to a poem.
That, you know, like I totally understand that. Like we become visual artists because there's something that we can say with our art that we can't quite say with words, right? And I had told you at the time that maybe the argument for learning how to write about your work is to prevent future people from misrepresenting it, or to have the control over the way that it's talked about. And I'm kind of curious, like now that you've been exhibiting a whole lot since you've been out in the world, graduated, how...
It can be frustrating, I
agree. Yeah. How's that been?
No, it's like sometimes I read things that has been like, and it's like, especially when it becomes like through the lens of like, exactly the thing that I avoid, like my identity becomes the boldest thing out of everything. But then I feel like if I even like write about it, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I have to. That's
what would you want? What would you want the boldest thing to be about the work out there instead of your identity being foregrounded?
Just like I don't know, the things that like relate to all humans more than like the experiences that are more shared between. I mean, I know like many of the works are, I see them more personal than if it's a collective thing, even though I see how people from Iran can relate to it sometimes. Like they can read through layers that maybe others can't, but at the same time, when I don't want to take a stance of like, I'm Iranian, I'm saying this. I want this to be, this is me as a person, and this is my experience as a person who is also Iranian.
Well, those identities are always flattening, right? Like there's not one type of Iranian anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think so much of your work also often deals with like themes like death, the passage of time, generational inheritance. I think, perfect. We had put these works in. This is a piece you did. Where you can talk about it.
Oh, okay. Actually, it doesn't have a title. I tried to remember, did I title this? I don't think it had a title. But it's basically, I made this, this work, I did it during the pandemic. It was like very time consuming. So I painted like frames of few second films that I took. Like, for example, this was like me scratching my knee, the top one. This one was my mom just like going to bed.
Oh yeah, we both had leg rashes at the time.
Yes, exactly.
We were talking about that. Yes. And you were like pitching yourself in these animations. Yeah.
Actually, I had a title for that. It was a rash room. I was thinking about like, a room full of like scratching.
Your mom or your grandma?
It's my mom.
Going to bed?
Going to bed. And so it was like very simple gestures that I took all the, like basically painted each of them with clay on clay. So they are all tiles. And then I was exhibiting them in how you saw it in the first image. I haven't shown really the animation. I animated it after, but I don't know, I haven't showed it together because I feel like the materiality of that, the time, presenting the time in that way was more interesting for me. And just like being on clay and
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because, like, you know, as people who work with clay, we know very well that ceramics is, you know, often talked about as one of the most permanent materials. The oldest human records come to us from fired ceramics, but it's also a really impermanent material, right? Because if it's not fired, it just goes back into the earth and endlessly can, like, recycle itself. And I feel like you use ceramic. You always wanted to use ceramic, even when there weren't very good ceramic facilities at CalArts. You were like, I want to bake this thing in this tiny kiln that's really big. How do I do it? And so I feel like it's interesting that you've been thinking through time, and then you started in grad school working a lot with things that seep and drip, like leaking through the ceramic. I think we have another image. And I, in my own work, I also do a lot of things that seep and drip. And for me, I was, often thinking about that in relationship to Asian water clocks, often made out of ceramic, that have like a ceramic vessel that's dripping into the next, and they keep time in that way. And then in your this work, the past seeps through the present. Whose body is?
So the top is my grandma's body that is fired. Yeah, it's fired, but it has like tiny pores, holes that the water slowly is kind of seeping out of it.
And this is Margot Levin's couch.
Yes. Yes. And then the body on the couch, Margot Levin's couch, is my mom's body cast from unfired clay. So it's like, I don't know. Also, I see unfired clay to be, as it can recycle, is like more alive. And when the clay gets fired, kind of it becomes solidified, like a dead body, kind of like it becomes rigid and like, but it's also holding the water and it's like seeping out. And I was seeing like the water as like these stories, kind of the past, and kind of like also standing for a history that like this can extend for many generations, and how much of stories passed down and kind of seeps from one body to the other. And that was like.
I mean, I feel like you play with this idea of erosion and like this wearing away through time, but then also like this work is part of a series where these fragments of clay are fired at a different temperature than the tablet, so they ooze and appear to be seeping, but they're actually permanent and fired, right? So there's this arrested moment of melting and oozing. So you're playing with all these different stages of time's effects, and as a way to kind of think about your family and inheritance, or maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I love more stories than like untold story. I saw it as untold story, as like formless, kind of out of control, like things that are oozing. It's like doesn't have a clear shape. It's like a sweat kind of like coming out. And
I'm gonna go forward and we can go backwards.
This one. So to some extent, it was in my control where I put these bits of glaze, but when I put it in the kiln, it's kind of like it's in the hands of the fire and the temperature and the interaction of the glaze bits with each other.
Oh, that's interesting, because aren't some of them related to like Zoroastrianism and like the agency of objects? I remember you telling me something about the family archive. You're like, they were dressed this way.
No, it was, I think I was thinking about how maybe somehow, not this specifically, but in some images, like the dress codes, like I was thinking if these images were shown in Iran would have a different read than if the images that are being seen here, because in some, like for example, my grandmother is wearing this like, like this one, like outfit that is like more specific to the religion that I grew up in. And so I was just thinking about that. And with the stories, I was also thinking specifically for being from a religion that has like throughout history, like in Iran, things have happened. And then I have, I always felt like growing up there, like, okay, in school, you don't talk about this, or you are like so many stories from great-grandparents that my grandma would tell me, and then my parents would tell me, and like, no one kind of like, it's just words of mouth more than, I don't know. And I was thinking about this glaze oozing out as a personal story, but I mean, it could have like other.
Yeah, but I mean, I relate to that too. There's so many things my family has told me in fragments that without the full explanation, and then they're just these little things that clearly keep affecting the present, but you don't really know the whole story.
Exactly.
Should we go back to the This one. And also, even though you often work with body casts of your own body and your grandmother and your mom, your dad is a little bit present because he helps sometimes, right?
Yes, he does. He does help me a lot with the
Motors and stuff.
motors, problem solving.
Does he ever ask you, where's my hand?
No, I don't think he wants to be casted. He definitely doesn't. He enjoys seeing my mom trapped in the cast, but no. It was a joke.
And these works specifically, which also relate to the work that was at the Hammer and made in LA with the fountain, they often seem to reference praying, but you've been like a little wary around a kind of identitarian projection around praying. Can you talk about what these gestures mean?
The gesture is more for me like that openness of the gesture I'm interested in, like that kind of submission, but also like with here, like with the tapping, like that combination of like this submission, but also is like, then it contradicts with like this like tap, that it could both be like a crest or it could be like a, you know.
I mean, it's different because here it's in the other room, right? The
Oh, yeah,
hands
yeah.
are moving, but it's a
Yeah.
little bit
It's-
less prayer-like.
It's definitely, and then some, also I like, when I was like that motion, I was thinking, okay, some might be just like rubbing against each other and some might be more tapping hardly. And so it's like always this like different gestures and different, that it can like have connection with different connotations kind of like, what does that mean? Or for each person, it could be just like a yoga, child
Erotic
poses.
touching
Yeah.
for some people. This work with the hands.
Yeah, and it's like another one that is like kind of this many of the hands on top of each other, that there is one stack of it here that is like, I call them mountains, just like, you know, and I like to title them, I don't know, I like nature titles because I think everyone can relate to, everyone knows it, and it can have that micro, macro kind of effect on the
And it
object.
makes sense with the other work where the landscape
Yeah.
is also the body. I mean, one thing I really love is also that there's a way one can look at your work over the years and trace the material excitement that you got. So like this work and the fountain piece, what was it called? That Hammer made in LA?
Until all is resolved.
Until all is resolved. There was a lot of rust that happened with the untreated metal and the water falling on it, and those kind of led you to this. I remember you were like, I have something in my studio I want to show you, I'm so excited. And you were starting to draw with the rust, right, and on the metal. And then when you were starting this residency, you sent me this flurry of excited texts like, do you think you can cast metal on ceramic? And I was like, I don't think so. I think it'll break, but if anybody's gonna help you try, this person here that runs the sculpture lab and is an amazing artist himself would probably be down to do that. And then you made this really incredible work show, proving me wrong. So yeah, maybe we're kind of, I guess, nearing our last 10 minutes or so, but maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience here doing this residency, and also I can show some of the images from your other residency you recently did at Jingdezhen, and you can talk about the porcelain material research you were doing there.
Yeah, no, definitely material is the core like excitement for me that actually gives me the idea is like, what does the material do and how combining this on. So with ceramic and the metal, I knew that putting a hot ceramic, it would like break and crack the hot metal on the ceramic would break and crack it. But then we did it and I realized that even though it cracks it, but then when it cools down, it kind of like holds it together. That I thought that's like an interesting contradiction, that something that shatters something at the same time is like holding it together. So I don't know, I like that contradiction. So it's like sometimes like I did not think about that, but then material told me, oh, that's like I don't know, a more philosophical thing lesson to me. And yeah, so at OXY, I was teaching a class. My students are here. Thank you for coming. And thank you for the Wellness Artist grants that made it possible to be here. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, yeah, I got to experiment with new materials. And
Were you bringing that into your teaching in that class? Were you teaching them metal and ceramic?
We didn't, no. The metal part not, but with the casting ceramic we did. But the students kind of witnessed me while I was doing and preparing it with Chris. So, and what else I have to?
Do you want to talk about like how you came to the process of starting to carve the metal or rust the metal? You made some. I can't remember if there's any in this show, but in Joan there's a really beautiful triptych.
Yeah.
That's a metal. What do you call them? Metal painting?
Metal
drawing?
drawings. I
Yeah.
think they're.
But they're kind of drawn with rust and then sanding and yeah.
Yeah.
they're really
So.
interesting.
Yeah, with the rust, I think like when the rust happened in the sculptures at Hammer, then I was like, it's also visually like how close does it looks like clay kind of eroding, and that erosion was in the metal was exciting for me, that like slow change in the material. And then with the tab, like the drawings, I was basically, I was like, how can I control the rust? And then experimenting with it and realizing, okay, like the thing that prevents the rust, I can paint with that. And so then I'm basically painting in reverse, like painting with a sealant and then exposing it to the process of rusting. And then it's like, it's a nice also continuation of the process, and like the emergence of the image is from this process of rusting. And
It's nice to imagine that eventually, after you're dead and I'm dead, like they'll be like rusted and like they'll just be, there won't be an image, there'll just be holes, maybe fragments of orange color. But it's nice how you play with all these elemental kind of not, things that happen in nature, entropy, rust, water, fire, stone. Do you want to talk briefly about the porcelain you were really excited about?
Yeah, and this is like a new thing that
paper thin.
They're paper thin, and they are kind of bigger scale. I did it this summer when I went to Jindajian in China, and I'm excited about it. I have like some ideas about like how
Future project.
Exactly, and how the light now is like how to work with the light, and this kind of like a window kind of a situation again works like a wall in between, like separating, and like the light make things exposed through the image, and like what things you can hide and what things can become visible. So yeah, that's like the next things.
Well, I think we can open it up to any questions. Yeah. Cedric?
Yeah, Roksana, do you remember an older piece of yours that you made where you had your grandma walk on a rug?
I love that piece.
Which is really good because the rug is actually made out of squeaky toys. So like you just hear. And I was wondering
She was
if
so mad, right?
Huh?
Wasn't she so mad about having to do
No,
it?
she was confused.
like in this version, like you can walk around and
That's
you're
true.
That is
I
true.
never
I
thought
connected
about it.
those.
Yeah. But I was curious, like if you go back to this like feral version where you're jumping on this painting in the water. Do you feel like maybe there's some kind of fun trickster energy that has to do with like letting other people kind of see how the interaction of something's happening that you set up?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I was kind of curious also, similarly, like Candice, do you ever give students advice about humor? in work. Because I love that you've titled one of your pieces that had research, like meaningless squiggles. And I was like, wait, is this serious? Are they not serious? But I'm always curious, how do artists deal with humor? Because some of your stuff is really funny when Candice explains it as not sexual.
Yeah.
But then, like, there is a sincerity and like the joy of playing with material and discovering what happens in performance that you can't plan for. But like, humor isn't necessarily a planned thing. I feel like a lot of times it's like being really true to some weird niche that you get, and that's kind of the joy of it. But like, would either of you be able to talk about what you think is happening when something works in like a humorous way, but it doesn't become a joke?
In your work?
No,
Or,
in your work.
I mean, I think, yeah, I often do, when I'm meeting with students, I do often talk about like, oh, this work is taking itself way too seriously, and it's kind of closing the room in on itself. It's making it kind of claustrophobic, and there's only one way to interpret it and like feel about it. And humor is a way that like opens the door. Also, humor is a way we deal with like really difficult things, right? Like often things that are painful, we make a joke, or at least in Asian families, we do. And it's I think it's just a very cultural way we deal with like difficult or taboo things. They become funny because we're like, this nervous feeling is erupting in the body, right? So I think bringing humor in, especially when you're working with like heavy subjects, like a lot of your work is, it's like a moment of, and also not just humor, but tenderness. There's a lot of moments of tenderness amidst like heaviness or seriousness in your work that I think like add moments of levity or warmth.
No, I agree.
But I do think a lot of your work is intentionally humorous.
I really don't plan the humor. If I
But also
planned it,
you're
it
like
wouldn't
a
be
funny
funny.
person. Like you're often just giggling.
But whenever I plan to be funny, it's like doesn't work. So it's like I promise I don't plan the humor. It just happened to be in it. I think it comes more like being playful, and then creating a situation that is just like, I think like I'm kind of experimenting on myself and on my audience, kind of like creating a situation that I'm like, okay, how are we going to interact with this thing? And I feel like usually the first reaction is like, this is ridiculous, and like, or this is funny. It's like, I mean, I'm thinking about like the one that I'm mumbling, like that's like, it was from a very serious thought. Like, what if you take out the meaning out of the word, but then it ended up to be a funny thing for people to do it, and everyone was laughing and like enjoying it, which I don't think is like against it or anything, but it's like that layer just added up later. Yeah.
Oh, look at all these wonderful people who came out. Misty.
I'm still putting the questions together.
Okay.
So I have a question for you too. For Roksana, I personally resonate that, we get frustrated when we have to explain about our work in a different way that how the work happens. Because usually many times I feel like work happens to me than me planning everything and just executing it. Then if it's not something that we plan things out and just executing it, then I want to turn this question in a way that what does it do for you, what the work does for you, then trying to explain it. Because it seems like, as your title says, like untold story, I cannot remember the exact title, but it seems like that as your work lands, it seems like untold story just flow out of you. Like, is that something that the work does for you?
Yeah, I think I like having the control over the work, or how much I definitely like have a plan, and like I go to some extent and create the situation, and then the rest kind of like the work is doing or the people are doing, and that's I think the part that like sometimes I realize what the work is doing after it's shown or after the opening or after when I hear feedback from people, I'm like, okay, this is what's happening. But yeah, did I?
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like it's funny because I feel like you guys went through similar grad school gigs, but I think it's hard because in grad school you're meant to like explain everything and know everything your work is. But I actually think that you make one makes really bad work when you are executing a thing you can perfectly explain and it's exactly like what you thought you were going to make. You're then limiting yourself to your own mind, right? Which even if it's a brilliant mind like yours, it's not as great as it will be is if you're open and humble and like listening to what the material and the world is like bringing in unexpectedly to the work that makes it more rich.
Exactly.
And I think that's related to humor too. Like humor is also being like humble enough to not take yourself so seriously, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like not taking it or let it happen, and it's just more exciting for myself to when I make works that it's so predictable, it's very boring for me, and like especially for the openings when there is not enough like unknown.
What surprised you in this work that you made?
I mean, the part that we had to like put it together was very like the part that we were like, would this work or not? And like, would it do, then figuring out where to put the foam, how long the rods should be, how like all of those things were the unknown part and then also how like when there was that big crowd, we didn't know like with a big crowd of
Nobody
what
was
would
listening
happen.
to the sign. It says no more than 8 people, and then it was like 20 people on the floor, and then a frantic worker screwing the metal in.
Yeah, so it's like all those elements that it just like makes it exciting. Yeah.
I have a kind of question to this. Like having said that, then what if artist doesn't want to put too much personal narrative on the work or the explanation or representation of like about the work, then what is advice for really how to get out of this personal narrative and
I mean, I think there's always ways to talk about your work that are nested, right? Like if you want to resist a personal narrative or an identitarian read of your work, you can focus on the kind of scholarly work or the larger theoretical frameworks that the work is activating and then just really not talk about it. But, in some ways it's not always that honest, right? Like sometimes the work is deeply personal and it's like a disservice to the work to not just admit it.
very personal question.
Hi, Rodrigo.
You have those images in television, and are you thinking? I mean, as you are making more work, and you have to show right now. How do you think about the end of the archive?
Archive as an
Like
artist?
those images are from the family.
These
you know,
images.
So it's like, are you preparing? How do you think about the limits of those images and like the finitude of the images? Not the limit.
Like what will she do after that family archive is done?
Yeah, how you prepare for that in a way that can be, creative for other work.
Yeah. I feel like that series of work, like those images existed. My great uncle took them at some point and they're limited. And it just like kind of those pieces came together. And I don't know I'm not sure if let me know if I'm
I
getting
also
it
feel
wrong.
like your work is not limited to the archive, so it's like you're already like what Roksana will do when the archive ends is what like she's already proliferating this like imagined landscape and portraits are like right.
Yeah,
But are you specifically asking will there be other kinds of photo-based imagery or?
Yeah, I mean it's a very clear difference between them and not these images I remember when you started thinking about these like possible performances and kind of like, you know, but when you were working with images, you very directly were doing some sort of image transfers.
Yeah.
And there is always this kind of like, this archive look to the images when you present them. So I wonder if you like, how you are dealing with the finitude of those images.
Yeah.
And how are you thinking about like, despite that they can be a repetition and they can be a reduces
Exactly.
gestures that you do, but
Yeah, I actually can see these images maybe get repeated in another word. I see these images as a material, as like a personal thing that is an image. It's like the most personal thing I've shown in like very didactic ways. Like this is my family image, and that's like to me is a material, like family image, and that can exist as a material that other people can relate to as family image. The image itself to me doesn't matter that much. So that image to me can be repeated as a subject matter kind of. So if I like go back to these, probably it would be like standing for me is like a personal thing, a family image. What does that mean? And like, how can I like, I don't know if it's with another material or like here was it being on a ceramic and then these things are oozing out of it. It's like that material, that image kind of makes sense together. And then, And then
I think about the hammer performance as being so
exactly.
related, right? Like, so do
Exactly.
you want to bring that in?
Yeah, and then the other instance was like the hammer performance that I did. That was like these family images that were like with the air were floating in this like between two windows.
You built a wall that you were embedded inside of, and we could see you through a window
Yeah,
as you were trying to catch
catch
them,
the
right?
images.
Yeah.
So it was very it was like one of the most. I'm still like.
It's not that literal.
It
Don't
is
say
literal.
that. It's very poetic. Yeah.
I still am like kind of.
And they're kind of
sometimes-
disintegrating as you're
They
trying
were,
to catch them.
yeah.
I remember seeing some of them. They
Exactly.
like were.
So again, there is like many of those images were repeated. Like then they became just like a stand-in for like someone's personal life memory. So I never see them as I don't see it as like a person, like I'm a photographer and I took them. Like it's like something that is and I feel like everyone has something like that, like a family image, and that's it could be related to in that way.
Is there one last question or
I was wondering, since like you talked about like, I know your work touches on like, you know, how time changes like the material, like if your fingers tapping, wearing down the ceramic, or like the water and the rust, and then you spoke of nature as a universal, and I was wondering if you've done any work that's like in nature, like site specific.
That the same thing, like the nature is doing that too. Let's see. Actually, I did one thing. I barely have much images of it, but when I was with that group that I said of it, so I basically there was a scaffold somewhere, and I thought about like making a sculpture that in a winter. So the city I'm from, like there is usually just one snow a year. And I was like, I'm making this sculpture for the first snow, the only snow of the year. And I made it. And I don't remember actually if it snowed or not, but I have images of it. And I basically turned, it was like with fabric, I turned it, and then it became like a kind of, I was just like tying things. And
was it to catch the snow or
to catch, so the snow would sit on it. I was like making surfaces for later, the snow sitting on it. That's the only thing that I think like that I like.
I mean, you did that
was
whole
kind of-
public art commission in Yez.
Oh, but I was not thinking about like erosion of nature and like the decay that I expose it to the, like a conversation with the nature kind of. I think that's what
And then I have a follow-up, just, did you have permission to put that on the turret, or would you just go up and do it?
Well, that was in a private space, and so I had a permission. So it was, yeah, it was a fun one. Yeah. Someone else had one question.
I was wondering, like, since a lot of your work is very like interactive, and I know you mentioned like, you know, when there's over the capacity of people in a certain area, like safety-wise, maybe others would get involved. But like, did you feel it was important to kind of like, you know, like if someone didn't grab the needle, like kind of like poke it somewhere else, and maybe someone else would see, like almost like, you know, point out the interaction portion if people weren't getting it, or have people just pretty much always know, you know, like kind of like that follow their intuition to like interact.
Like how do I like predict kind of like how they would happen, or
Like more so if they're not doing what you pictured, then you get involved and you just kind of let it flow into whatever.
yeah, it's like to some extent I would like put the clues or like think about, okay, what are the possibilities of like people would understand, like what are the little bits that I can put out there that I would give the clue to the audience, and in each work is kind of different. Like for example here we put the ramp, also we put the writing right next to the ramp, so it's like those little things that kind of in each work that the audience is supposed to interact. Like I remember with the needle one, no one was interacting when I started, and so I put the needle out and I started tapping to the thing, and then that was the first person started, and that was all I needed, and then people just got the message.
Okay, yeah, I was curious because it seems like some of the interaction is like part of the piece itself, obviously. You know, so it's like if that's not happening, people don't always read signs. Like, you know, so it's like, or I would be like, I don't know how to touch this kind of a thing. So like that's interesting to hear. And then I have like one quick question, sorry, just to follow it up, it's not related at all, but to that last question. When you shared like the pieces of that you had done back when you were in Iran versus like here, like audience-wise, I know obviously it was a different time of life as well, but I know you touched briefly earlier on like not wanting that to be a really big part of your identity, but like even when you're talking about how you write, and it's like so poetic, but that's so Persian, you know, so it's like, do you feel like you like take that out, or is it just more so like, okay, I don't want that to be in like my bio for every piece, you know, necessarily, or you know, in times that maybe it's like coming up more, is it like, I don't know, I guess like how do you interact with that? Such a big part of life.
Yeah, it's like it's the idea, like it's me, and this is a part of me, and this is how I grew up, and this is like, I think even in the language, Farsi language, it has a lot of like a word can have many different connotations and how you say it, and so that's like the way I communicate, and it's like less conscious, and I feel like it's more unconscious in that terms, and like maybe things that I kind of like don't want to also is like is that, and I mean I can, or other people who might know about culture can read and pinpoint, oh, this is why you're doing this, but it's never like, oh, I'm on purpose like rejecting this, or I'm on purpose embracing this. Yeah.
So I think we're at time, so we need to end there, but I realized we didn't play this last video, so I'm gonna just play it as we end. We didn't play that one, yeah. But you can walk around.